live. Hello, everybody. Baseball is back. We are John and Evan from Cubs Insider, and we are two happy guys. I'm happy. Are you happy, Evan?
I'm excited, man. I'm a little bit exhausted. Like, it's just emotionally taxing to sit there and like refresh, or like keep checking different people's Twitter stuff. And there was a lot going on for me yesterday, so I'm very, very happy to have had baseball be a part of that. It's good.
Yeah, it was a little, this whole thing has been kind of surreal, to be honest with you. It's like it's something that we knew was coming, since the CBA got, redone. Was it after the 2016 season? They kind of put a lot of stuff on the back burner after that CBA, and I think everybody knew that this one was going to be contentious.
Yeah.
And I mean, we well in advance, right? Almost immediately after the prior CBA was signed, it was obvious that there were going to be issues that were just kind of kicked down the road. And then COVID happened, and so it was just kind of like that whole season and the disagreements that came out of that, trying to get the season restarted, arguing over money, and you just kind of felt like that was a preview of things to come for this year. And certainly I think it was, obviously not the same issues, some of the same issues, with the DH being in play and extended playoffs. Did they end up with 14 team extended playoffs?
I think it just stayed at 12.
Did it? Okay.
Which is weird. It's so strange that's like,
that is weird.
Of all the other stuff. But that one kept going back and forth, which was so odd, because it was like, all right, it's 12. Like there was talk, it's going to 14. That's what no, actually they settled back at 12. I was going to go to 14. No, actually they came back to 12. So, and oddly, I thought that would be one of the big sticking points, because it was certainly an area where the union had a lot of leverage, but it ended up being the stuff with the international draft that really, at the end of the day, had to kind of go through, which, again, very odd that's, especially with it not, like, the whole thing was it's not going to start till 2024. And that's what's so strange to me, is that gives you, and I'm still not entirely certain what I think, right, the concern on the player's side is up until this point, those young men there and literal kids in many circumstances, because they're reaching tacit agreements with some of these kids at the ages of 12 and 13, which is utterly insane to me. Insane. I mean, you're talking about prepubescent, like, those kids might suck 4 years from there. Like, oh, this kid's a stud at 12. He might be awful when he's 16. You know what I mean? Like, look around. My son is 13. He's trying to make the middle school baseball team. I can't imagine these people. But anyway, but at least they have the ability to, ply their trade and to try to, pick whichever team fits best for them and market themselves. And in the process of that, they're getting an education, they're getting a place to stay, they're getting food. So there's a lot of things that are being provided to these young men there, and whether it be the Dominican or other areas that maybe they wouldn't otherwise have. And so I could see where if they say, hey, we're going to clean this whole thing up via a draft, because it's a disgusting, seedy process overall. There's a lot of corruption. But the downside of that is, if there's more money going into the bonuses, is that money coming from where teams otherwise would have spent on these academies and to train up these kids from, 10, 11, 12 through 16, 17 when they're getting drafted? And I think there's that concern, is that some of that money and that infrastructure gets pulled out. And so that's the only thing I can think of. But it is funny, right? And I understand that you can be an advocate for something without having experienced it, but it's like Fernando Tatis Jr. being one of the kind of preeminent voices speaking out against a draft. I'm like, dude, your dad played in the majors. You were a stud the whole time. Like, he never had to worry about, like, it didn't matter to him. He didn't need an academy from when he was 12 to come find him and pull him off the street and take him in. And again, I don't want to make light of that situation or say he can't be an advocate, but I don't know that his experience is necessarily germane to the conversation. And I got to think, if you give him 2 years, they'll figure some of those things out and make sure that stuff all gets taken, because those teams have a vested interest in making sure, that there is a very large pool of available players when they do go to draft. So anyway.
Well, and my understanding is the big piece of corruption, especially in the Dominican, is the role that the agents play, right? Like, don't they bring these kids up from a very young age, and they kind of almost, I don't want to say breed them, but for lack of a better word, it's bring them up, provide them with probably very little, from our perspective, but from their perspective, it can feel like a ton, right? Food to eat, just food to eat, groceries regularly, paying bills here and there, that are just meant to kind of live off of for their family. And then these agents get a huge cut when these kids go pro, right? Like 40% or something like that of their
They
of
shouldn't.
that
They
that
shouldn't be
initial
getting
payment.
that much. But I mean, if they're, maybe Jim Bowden, if he's the GM, he's probably taking some of it too. I mean, they should be getting a smaller chunk than that. But I think the biggest thing too, though, is it's not even necessarily the certified agents, but you've got all these go-betweens and handlers and trainers, and so there are a lot of people. Not to mention
Well, yeah,
families
I'm
who
sorry. Maybe that's what I meant, is more
yeah.
the trainers than the
Yeah.
agents.
So not the actual certified agent, but yeah, there's guys down there, because an agent can't technically work, and if you're certified by the MLBPA, they don't want to. But it's just like anything else, right? Like, if you think people haven't been trying to do backroom deals throughout this entire lockout, I got a bridge to sell you somewhere in the middle of nowhere, right? But yeah,
Well, it's
these guys are
interesting though.
out there working with kids, so.
You would have thought that there would have been some deals. I haven't
Because
seen with the
nobody
last
wants to
5
admit
days.
it. Like, nobody wants to be the first one to be like,
Exactly.
hell yeah, we were working on
Just
this.
wait a couple days.
Right, like the moment it gets ratified, somebody gets signed, and they're like, "Whoa, hold on, what the hell was this from?" It's like, "Oh no, we were talking, on the up to 11:59 on the on the first. We just picked it back up." So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, exactly. But the Twitter timeline is the place to be, people. I know you're watching us now, and I don't want to discourage you, so maybe you can have two screens open. But definitely, lots of stuff going on there. Obviously, lots of stuff going on CubsInsider.com and various other websites that cover the shenanigans of baseball. But we're just glad that it's back. Spring training players report on Sunday, right? I mean, most of them are down there. I see there's a picture of Miguel Amaya and Manny Rodriguez arriving from John Antonoff at Baseball in Focus on Twitter, if you want to follow him.
Go check out, like, you can't help but feel good. Go look at Jordan Bastian's timeline and look at the video he's got with Justin Steele, and look at the smile on Justin's face as he's talking about being better. Like, that you look at, you're just like, because he, again, that's one of the dudes who, like, yeah, he spent some time up there last year, but he's one of them who's impacted by that minimum salary, who wasn't going to get paid, you know what I mean, who hasn't made that much yet, and who has spent quite a bit of time in the minors, and is an exceedingly good, like, we talk about that. I talked about that with Max Bain. I talked about that with Ethan Roberts, with Scott Efros. All the guys we've had on, like, are these just some of the best dudes that there are, and Justin Steele is one of them. I've interviewed him a couple times at Cubs convention, talked with him when he came through with the iCubs, and it's just you feel so great for those guys. And interesting note on that too. Let's talk about this just a moment. In the player vote, which ended up being overwhelmingly in favor of accepting, the executive committee voted 8-0 against accepting it, and then the team reps voted 26-4 in favor of it. So it's very interesting to see how that's not surprising, but it is a little bit interesting to me, because you are talking about your Max Scherzers and with Syndergaards, guys who are making a boatload of money, right? Who have zero, like, Max Scherzer could never play baseball again, and he's perfectly set for life. And I do wonder at what point the break, that, like, do you see that break to where it's like, all right, guys, this is this is probably as good as you're going to do at this point. Let's get this thing going. And that's what the players are like, hell
Well,
yeah, dude, let's go.
It's just an odd disconnect. It's like, was their vote against merely symbolic? I mean, obviously, this was the first time that they voted at all for the for all the players. It's like, what was the message? I mean, they had to have had some type of Zoom call with the players to explain why they were voting against it, right? I mean, when you have an executive committee that goes completely unanimously against something, and then everybody that they're supposed to be kind of leaders of just goes the opposite direction, it speaks volumes towards that group of leadership, I think. And I don't know what to say about it. I don't want to be negative, but it seems odd to me, and that's why it's like, was it just symbolic versus actual kind of
and
like
they may
dissent?
well have known, and it may be one of those things where they knew for certain that the player reps were all going to vote or mostly going to vote in favor of it. And so they just kind of did that just as a show of like, you guys suck and we know it's in poor faith or whatever. But, and I'm struggling because I'm looking at the comments on the side. I'm struggling with seeing somebody say that trading Greg Kimbrell was the worst trade the Cubs have made in decades. And I'm struggling for how you can manage to say something
Don't
like that.
Don't get distracted by the comments.
Between Quintana, I mean, that's not even the worst trade they've done with the White Sox in the last 5 years. Come on now. And just, but for those of you who are having your little sidebar, Drew Gray, the Cubs' 3rd round pick, had Tommy John, the lefty. So did Cody Hoyer. But no, it's interesting to see how that stuff all broke down. But like, you kind of knew that was coming. And it was so funny though, because there was a moment, more than a moment, but a few minutes there at least, where the reporting's coming down, and it went from like overwhelmingly good to then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, there's some people saying this might not get through. It's like, oh, you sons of bitches, if this doesn't happen, because if it didn't happen there, and that's where I was a little bit concerned, because by and large, the owners did a lot of different things, and the way they negotiate and everything is to try to put it onto the players, right? Put the onus on them from kind of the fan view perspective. And so if that had been the situation, and it had been one of those things where the players held their vote and voted it down, particularly if the player rep vote was closer to where the exec committee mattered with that 8-0 margin, right? And then it's at that point you're talking about legitimately breaking the union, because if the players are voted, like, let's say it's fairly close, or again, they needed 20 votes, right? And so let's say they got, it's not as widespread, it's 18-12, among the player reps, and now you've got the executives saying, the executive committee 8-0 against, and now you voted against it in an almost even split. That's exactly what that looks like. So I'm very, very happy it went the way it did. And I have to say though, you remember how Major League Baseball canceled the first 2 series, and then they didn't get an agreement, and they canceled 2 more series, and they're like, oh, nah, just kidding. we're gonna start a week late. We'll make them up.
They backtracked on that with a quickness, didn't they?
Yeah,
well,
and we said from the start the deadline was bullshit. I mean, it was never real.
And that was the thing, is that, like, if they didn't get a full season in and a full season of pay for the players, which is much more significant than the games, then you knew it was going to just be something where, like, you could see the whole season getting canceled. And honestly, I mean, I think a lot of people in the know felt like we were headed down that path. I felt like we were headed down that path for sure. Because if you get to a point where you're not playing all the games, and then you start to have to argue about how much the owners are going to pay the players, which is going to be less than what their contracts are for, then it just gets really super ugly. And something interesting, a tweet that I thought was very interesting, one of the ones that came from Senator Dick Durbin, I don't know if you saw that, where he called into kind of brought it into play, was their antitrust exemption. And as soon as he brought that up, boy, it seemed like everything changed. And I don't want to say that everything hinged on that one tweet. It said, enough, after almost 100 days of the MLB lockout, it's time to reconsider MLB's special antitrust exemption, which allows them to act as a lawful monopoly. Fans across America deserve better. Message to the owners: unlock the lockout and play ball. I think that was probably a very significant tweet for the owners because, listen, they don't want that to be part of the conversation. Not that that's going to happen, and that Congress is going to overturn their antitrust exemption, which would either have to be overturned by Congress or by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has stated that they don't want to mess with it; that they think Congress should be the ones doing it. But I think when that comes into the conversation, owners start to get very nervous and they see that as the beginning of a conversation they don't want to have. And so I just wonder how much that tweet really motivated these billionaire owners to say, let's this might be a path we don't want to go down. So let's get rolling more than maybe they would have had that not come out.
Well, that and I think to a bigger extent, and that was maybe part and parcel with, like Rob Manfred admitted that the use of social media really impacted this whole process, right? Because you had, and clearly some of those reporters are in the pockets of Major League Baseball and the owners. Again, if you're talking about Jim Bowden,
Really,
John Heyman very clearly has ownership sources that
worst.
he's
My
coming
God.
from. And and they're almost all in New York is what it feels like, right? Like and you can really tell that because there would be all this crap, like all the narrative crafting was done with this optimism and all this stuff, when at the time the players weren't actually feeling that, so it was a narrative being crafted by the league. But you had a lot of this. So fans and players were able to communicate with people, fans were able to see that and to understand what was really going on. And I think it took the owners a while to kind of figure that out, but clearly, and I tweeted about this a while back, or well, not a while back, it was like a couple days ago, but there had been kind of a sense, because we get, whether it's replies to me on Twitter, to the Cubs Insider Twitter account, Facebook's always really dumb, but it's still there, and then just comments, just the overall flow and things that I'm privy to. There had been a sense that I had been getting that fans were getting, not completely turning on players, but certainly shifting a little bit to like, okay, guys, like this is getting pretty close. Maybe you want to start, getting this done. But up until that point, and still mostly, people understood that this was an owner implemented thing, that this was in their hands to fix. And there were enough facts out there. Because let's talk about this, right? Topic we brought up many, many times. It's pretty clear. Two other things that happened immediately before this agreement. Apple had their little event and announced the new deal with MLB. And then the NBC Peacock thing came out. So between those two, you're talking about $115 million. So ESPN restructured their deal, backed out. It's about $150 million less per year that they're paying. But then ESPN said, hey, we'll pay you $85 million for the new first round of the expanded playoffs. All right, so they made some of that up. Then Apple's like, we'll pay you $85 million a year. Whoop, there's $170 million. Now NBC comes in with 30. So they lost 150 from ESPN, but they got back 200. And then this is the year that their increased playoff stuff kicks up. So they're actually making 26% more overall this year on their TV broadcast deals. And when that stuff starts coming out, and the owners are sitting there haggling over a few $1 million on the CBT, most of which is never going to matter, because everybody's like, whoa, there's this new cap. Would you go, over like 290 million? Nobody's going to 290 million.
Three or four teams that are anywhere near the cap at any given time.
Yeah, nobody's going that, like, and that's really, like, Scherzer and Francisco Lindor are voting against it because they're worried that the Mets will, that'll stop the Mets from spending. I'm like, if you're spending $300 million on your payroll, I mean, my God, if you don't win with that, like, you shouldn't need to go that high to win, and I'm not saying, I'm not advocating being cheap by any stretch, but man, that's a lot. But I think the ability for news to get out very quickly via social media, and for facts to reach people outside of very obvious spinning and outright falsehoods from Rob Manfred and the owners about biblical losses and revenue struggles and things like that. It's like, you aren't struggling a damn bit, and we can see it. We know exactly what's coming in here. Hi, Tom Ricketts. You got the Ricketts family is wanting to buy freaking Chelsea, an English football club for like $4 billion potentially. They're one of the students. So like, you cannot, and I understand. I completely. Hey, the family fortune is separate from the Cubs, and so those are two separate things. But don't sit here and tell us you can't afford to operate your baseball team when now your family might want to go buy this soccer club for more money than what the Cubs are even worth. That's hilarious.
That would be largely through debt, though. I mean, but it's not like they don't have assets
unless
up
Pop,
debt.
right? Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, Papa's worth $4.5 billion, right? He was the largest shareholder of TD Ameritrade when they sold to Schwab for $26 billion. So they've got a lot that's back there. Like, and dude, Papa Rick is in his 80s, man. How long is he sticking around? And so if you look at it, and there was a really good piece. And for the life of me now, I can't remember who the dude was. And I know who it is. I can see his face. I know who it is. Anyway, he wrote that piece in Sportico about how sports are a great way for billionaires or just the wealthy in general, even if they're not majority owners, right? It's a way. It's a way for them to diversify their assets, right? It's a new asset class for them to get into that they know appreciates very well, and that is kind of, again, it's like having a bigger yacht or whatever. It's a plaything.
There aren't that many ways to invest and protect billions of dollars. There just aren't safely in an environment where it's going to grow the way Major League Baseball grows. And I love it where people try to equate the return of baseball teams to like S&P 500 or something like that. It is completely different. To be able to invest $3 billion in the stock market, it's just not happening.
Yeah, you're not buying $3 billion of a company. Nobody's gonna be like, yes, here, take $3 billion of our stock.
Yeah, it's just
take controlling interest of our company.
One investment, in order to take that much capital, think about if you're really, really rich, and to be able to take that much capital and put it into one investment.
Jeff Morad, that's what it was. Sorry, I didn't, but it popped in my head. I had to say it. I didn't even look it up because my keyboard doesn't type, so I couldn't do it anyway. But anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
But to be able to take that much money and to put it into one investment, there aren't many things you can do that with. It's really limited to professional sports teams where it's going to appreciate, where it's going to generate revenue consistently year after year. There's just not anywhere for ultra rich people to invest their money, and that's why these teams are so valuable. And it's why they are not getting any poorer. But I think we all know that. We don't need to beat a dead horse here.
Although I want to take credit for it, because I'm going to say the owners were listening to me talk last week when I said, hey, if you assholes don't figure this out, those deals that you're getting for all these big TV, like, this stuff's going to go away. Like, if you fuck up your league, nobody's going to come back in 5 or 6 years to renegotiate these and pay you more again. Like, if viewership is down, if it's not a good investment for the broadcasters, they're backing away from that. But now you're seeing these changes. But that aside, I'm super excited because I booked flights to head out there. Well, not there, but where you will be later this month, and yes. and to be in Phoenix to go to Arizona spring training games. Yes, and see some baseball, and just my feeling about the sport in general, well, Major League Baseball in particular, because I'm involved in it at so many different levels now, but that just changed tremendously. Like, it was such a great afternoon because the Indiana Hoosiers came back from 17 down in the second half to beat Michigan. Then we got an agreement on Major League Baseball. My son had his second round of tryouts for his middle school team, and made that cut. So he's got another round on Monday. So it was like all around, I was like, man, this is just good news after good news for me. And just felt, and now it's snowing outside. It's cold as shit today. So it was like sunny and 60 yesterday.
I'm not dealing with snow.
Yeah, it's clearly very sunny there in Chicago.
Yeah, it's the game. It's just started.
Man, they got the season going quick.
It's, hey, it's like they were ready. I mean, the funny thing is you go to Cubs.com and they've got the schedule up. Opening day, April 7th at Wrigley against the Brewers, 4-game series over the weekend. Gonna be glorious. Hopefully it's not freezing cold. Hopefully it's sunny and nice, but who knows? players report on Sunday, and then the games I think are set to begin on the 18th,
18th,
Friday the 18th for the Cubs. I don't know about the other teams, but the Cubs play split squad at the White Sox and then against the Guardians at Sloan. They have 8 games at Sloan Park coming within this very short 10-day period, I think, and of which 4 of them are against the White Sox. So I thought that was interesting. The last 2 are against the White Sox on the 28th and 29th. Are there no games in? So that's interesting. So they have games on the 28th and 29th for spring training, but then the regular season doesn't start until a week later. That's kind of odd. More than a week. But
but that's when it was scheduled to end. Was that when it was scheduled to end anyway? And so they just kind of
spring training
off some games, yeah.
Maybe,
because it was originally supposed to start on the 30th. Yeah, because the season was supposed to start on the 31st. They only backed it up a week, so they didn't add any spring training dates. They're just going to go back to their, homes and work on that because spring training should have ended on the 29th. Regular season started on the 31st originally, so then they'll just do that. The Suzuki window opened last night. Whenever free agency opened back up. Somebody's asking that in the question. So free agency opened, it was about 6:15 somewhere in there. I think that the owners officially ratified the new agreement. So as of that point, free agency was back open. Seiya Suzuki, the Japanese outfielder who was being posted, right? His posting clock stopped when the lockout happened, and now it is ticking once again. So we're going to see a lot of stuff. I mean, you got all these rumors out there. I think you're going to see there's a lot of stuff with Chris Bryant, right? A lot of teams, I'm sure, are interested there. Bryce Harper's trying to get him to Philly. We've heard a lot of other teams involved. So that'll be a really interesting one. I mean, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Carlos Correa, who the Cubs are still, multiple people still tying the Cubs to him. So lots going to happen this weekend. It's going to be Saturday, Sunday, going to be wild, straight up.
Yeah, I think so. Hold on for a second. I can go a little longer, just so you know. I was going to type it in the comments, but then I'm like, oh well, you're just right here. I'll just tell you. It should be very interesting. Kind of how things unwind here over the next couple days, over this weekend in particular. You're going to see a lot of players signed. There's, I would have to believe, within the next few days, because teams want to get the players into spring training. Players want to get with the teams into spring training. So there's a lot of motivation on both sides. This sure does feel a lot like what you predicted several months ago, Evan, doesn't it? The frenzy where how the owners will wait until the very last second and then create this massive free agent frenzy.
That's really interesting that it would happen.
Seems to recall.
Now, I would think now, and what is interesting too, if we assume, right, that they do have this frenzy right now as camp gets started. The games don't start till the 17th, but you know what else starts on the 17th? It would be March Madness, which would take up a ton of. So now you're like, hey, we're fully removed from football. We got all this stuff. We're not going to miss any games, and now we got about 2 weeks right now between now and the 17th. Not 2 weeks, about 1 week, right? 1 week that we can really pack all this stuff in here. And will some stuff bleed into that? Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's going to be pretty incredible to see how that all works out. And then they don't need to worry about it because in the next couple of weeks, hey, it's just spring training, get back to business as usual. It's all chill while college basketball is finishing up, the biggest event there with their giant tournament. And then bam, that ends and you're right into your regular season. So quite interesting how they managed to make that work. I'm
very last
shocked,
minute.
Gobsmacked.
Very last.
Yeah, it's
very last second. They were able to do that. And the casual fan is not going to notice any of this. I think people, baseball people that like us and that run blogs and, sports writers and people that are really into the game. But the people who are paying attention to the lockout are people who weren't going away from baseball, right? There was no risk of Major League Baseball losing 95% of the fans who were paying attention to the lockout. We're all here for the long haul. The casual fan, which would have been the fan that they would have lost had the lockout had been extended, isn't even going to notice that anything happened. They're just the baseball season is going to start as What
Yeah,
lockout?
because you missed you missed a couple weeks of spring training, which half the people aren't paying attention to anyway. And really, prior to Marquee, remember the couple years before that, like there were like 3 games that you could watch. You know what I mean on television. You could listen to,
Yeah.
and you couldn't even listen to all of them on 670, right? And so that's only been a recent thing that we've been able, because by and large, you just had to kind of follow up on it later, or if you were out there, right? But they're still going to have a few weeks of spring training. The regular season only starts a week later, which is fine because, I mean, hell, that first
Not a
week you
great
got
week
one
anyways.
game, and then you have a day off, and then you play a game, and then if you have another series somewhere else that's their home opener, you got a game and a day off. And so you're really only missing about 4 or 5 games at most, some of which are in crappy weather that kind of suck to watch and suck even worse to go to. So, I mean, you skip a week of that maybe, and you end up playing all 162, and there'll be 9-inning, 9-inning doubleheaders back to that, right? The Ghost Runner stuff is gone, is my understanding. And so, yeah, it's once you get to April 7th and the games start, I mean, does anybody notice that? No, of course not. And so the fact that they were able to do this without missing any games, again, I think was a no-brainer. But that, certainly backs them off of, because as you had mentioned earlier, if they had gotten to that point and they had to, because that stuff has to be collectively bargained. So you knew it had to happen. But now it's almost like honestly, I'm sitting there going like, okay, I guess it's not that, I mean, it sucks a little bit because it's such a because of free agency being part and parcel with this now of getting things going in these next 3 days before report dates and all that, because it used to be you could string that stuff all along, right? Pitchers and catchers report, like you'd already had almost all the players signed with the exception of a few stragglers, right? So now you got pitchers and catchers reporting, now you got the first full squad workout, now you got all these pictures and reports and all this stuff, and then you get the game starting. Well, now it's going to be this next, between now and that first game, you got a week with reports and signings and all this stuff is just going to happen. And the only thing to me, and maybe that's better, that it just is going to be kind of like, boop, here's baseball. There's no ramp up. There's no nothing. It's just like, bam, birthed into the world, fully formed. So like Merlin.
Yeah, I mean, like the first couple of weeks of spring training, to be honest with you, are kind of like it takes a while for that to kind of get building momentum anyways. I mean, like the attendance on the weekends is big, but like it really doesn't start to tick up. I mean, until you get a couple weeks in anyways. So it's going to be like the shortest spring training ever. But
does the regular fan give a shit about like watching Kyle Hendricks roll into camp and then like seeing them doing PFPs on the field for a couple days? You know what I mean? Which is pitcher fielding practice for those who are who might not know. But it's like we care about that stuff because we're giant nerds for it, and because we run a content mill that depends on those things. But by and large, nobody gives a shit about seeing rookies out there taking BP. I mean, other than like, I love that. So quick aside, as I went to, we live right by like, there's a ton of, I think 7 or 8 elementaries in our school system. But the one my kids went to is a quarter mile away. And immediately south of that is a high school. And immediately south of that is another elementary. And immediately south of that is my son's middle school. So there's like, I just drive down this one street, schools. So
it's got to be a joy around 3 o'clock.
Dude, it is brutal. Thankfully, they're all on like different enough schedules, but the middle school is doing tryouts. So they had like track and tennis and softball and baseball. So just like it's pretty wild there. But I got to drive past the high school field. So as I'm going past, man, seeing all the high school kids out there and they're in their jackets, and they're partial, like the practice uniforms, and you're hearing bats on balls and seeing them field fly balls and hearing the mitts pop, and I had my window down because it was sunny and kind of warm. And I was just like, oh my God, that sounds good. And that to me, it's like, I don't even really care as much about some of the individual stuff sometimes as like going out there. This will be my son's first time going out to spring training, but it's just super cool to like sit out there on one of those berms and just kind of like take in the vibe of everybody just being there and being so happy to be a part of it. You know what I mean? And that's the part that gives, like, baseball is back. And that's the part that's cool versus, again, I'm going to write about all this stuff, but it's like, it gets a little tedious, even if it's exciting and it drives numbers to be like, oh, here's a rumor about this guy. Oh, this guy might sign here. And that's going to be
Yeah,
like
that was, dude. Well, it's
rapid
just,
fire.
and listen, like I said before, we knew this was coming, right? So you and I were fairly prepared. We run a blog. We kind of knew there was going to be this period where we didn't know how long baseball was not going to be in kind of locked out or strike or whatever it was going to be. But what I wasn't prepared for was dealing with the COVID side of it, where there's like, you're talking about like having no content. I mean, like in COVID, there was really no content. That's when we actually started this show,
Right.
was because we were like, hey, man, let's start a show because we have nothing else to do.
And we could
And
probably
we
get
got,
some guests on it because they don't have anything else to do either.
yeah, it was during the lockout. Everyone was locked out. So this show just kind of blossomed from there, if that's what you want to call it, but more like a weed kind of growing
Yeah.
up. Um, but it's not. It wasn't enough that happened, and we didn't have anything to talk about then. It was then knowing that this was coming, and so it's like, yeah, I think if COVID wouldn't have happened, this would have been a little bit more manageable, albeit still kind of hard to digest and to work through when you're basically, there's nothing to talk about. And but yeah, following COVID, that made it really hard. So
Well,
I get
and
what you're
that's
saying
what.
there.
How much did that steal from that? Of not being able to have fans at the ballpark, and you overdo it on the like you're hearing everything, which is kind of cool. The crack of the bat and so forth, but you don't have the roar of the crowd to back it up unless it's pumped in there. And I just think with them getting this done, because they were on the precipice. If they had gone too much longer, I think then you get a lot of people just like pissed off and like screw it. Now it's like relief, and being able to kind of get out there and see it again. And for us, funny thing was last Sunday we had practice outside, or Saturday it was like 70 and partly sunny, and like today it's snowing. Right, we're not gonna have practice Saturday tomorrow because it's only supposed to be a high of 29, and it's gonna be like 50, and I'll be out in my shorts and t-shirt. But the fact that it feels like, honestly, and I'm not saying this is the best way for them to do it, but I mean, really? And that's why I wrote that this is what they wanted to do. They had that furious November of all those monster deals coming through and just rapid fire. It sucked. In the meantime, it was super tedious and very, very tiresome with all this negotiation business. But, they've skipped the slowest part of their entire news cycle and let everything else kind of play out. And now they get to bring it all back in a rush. There's no ramp up. There's no worry about some of those slow. Like, it is going to be heavy news days in baseball from now until probably the end of the month. I mean, depending on how many of these guys, I think a lot of them will sign.
So it goes
early,
from where we got nothing to talk about, and we're just basically reiterating all the same stuff, to like this like fire hose blowing up of baseball news.
Too much to talk about. Yeah, but it's too much, and so it'll be like I'm gonna be sitting there. I mean, shit. Like I'm typing up something today about here's things the Cubs need to do like immediately. Like now that they can make transactions, this is some 7 things you need to address. And as I'm putting that out there, like as I'm publishing it, then John Rossi's like, "Hey, Cubs are still one of the favorites for Correa." I'm like, "Shit!" Now I gotta put that out there. And let me get on that. And then, so, once we start hearing these things and that's just, again, it's like, oh, it sucks to write about. It doesn't suck to write about. It's just difficult to kind of keep up with it and then actually I don't like just putting a blurb out there and then letting that be it. I like to sometimes probably be overly thoughtful about some of the stuff I put
massage your way through it.
Gotta make love to the post a little bit. Except it takes me usually longer than 30 seconds to write a post, I guess. So,
Evan is a lyrical poet, in case you guys didn't know, if you didn't realize that. If you didn't realize that, then you should probably go and read some of his
stuff.
Sounds
like a Vanilla Ice line. Take heed, because I'm a lyrical
Don't make
poet.
me start rapping. You do not
Miami's
want
on the scene,
that.
just in case you didn't know it.
So we have baseball is underway, and we're super excited. I think that's what we're trying to get to here at the as kind of our main, I think, point from this podcast is baseball is back. And
Yeah, just being exciting. I'm just excited about it. It's great.
We're just excited. I mean, the funny thing is that I don't know if it's funny, but like, you and I, we have our kids that are in baseball. So in all honesty, like it was like our fix was supplemented because our kids are in it, and I've been going to baseball fields and watching their games, and that's to me better than going to a regular game any day of the week. Although, I mean, it's hard to compare it to a Cubs game, but spring training, it's definitely better than spring training. So we had that, and now it's time to move on to bigger and better things. Another word is that I'd like to say that we are probably going to increase the frequency of our show here. We have not decided exactly how much we're gonna be doing it. I kind of like the idea of going after a series, which would be, after and then before. So you kind of do a breakdown of what happened in the series and a preview of the upcoming series. But who knows? We'll have to decide exactly how we do it. But I would say at least 2 to 3 times a week. So everybody gets to hear from us all the time.
Yay. That's
Yay.
now I'm sure that's what they're all just pining for. But if the comments on the side are any indication, I think kind of the standard radio thing is played out for a lot of folks. Although, I will say I obviously I appreciate being able to kind of guest on 670 The Score with relative frequency. Have been on there a few times overall and certainly in the last couple of weeks. So it's cool to be able to have multiple outlets, I think, and hopefully we get to continue running this for you guys, and folks can enjoy that. And it is sort of nice too to sort of talk through a few things on here that maybe are more difficult to kind of lay out in words, and you can sort of provide the proper context for it, because a lot of times people read something and then react kind of really vehemently to it when it's like, nah, continue to read, maybe build up a little bit more about this. And as Kyle said, I am famous. I'm very famous. I'm actually more famous in Chicago than I am in my own town. Like, I'm not famous is the wrong word, right? I use that
known. People know who you are.
But like more people would know me in Chicago than they would in my own hometown, in my small little town here, which is just funny. And I kind of like it that way because I can just walk around anonymously for the most part. Like, oh, that guy's really famous. Not really. Nobody ever does that. But
it's always weird when you do this type of stuff, though, and every once in a while, like, we're obviously we're not famous, but when somebody does recognize you and you don't know that person, it's kind of odd.
Yeah, and it does happen. Like it's happened at spring training.
Give us some inside info.
Some of which we know, but it'll happen. Like it's happened to me at Cubs games several times, like in various different cities, and my kids are like, "What? That's so weird."
I think this is a relevant comment here. The Sox fans are saying that the Sox blew it. I would agree with that statement far more than I would agree with the Cubs blowing it on
like
Kimbrel.
I don't
the
understand.
Sox were the ones that got screwed.
So the Cubs were awful.
Was terrible.
The Cubs were awful. They were going nowhere. Kimbrel was having a really good season, but who gives a shit if you got a closer for a team that blew everything else up? Exactly. So you got back a contact hitter that they desperately needed in their lineup, and a guy who, once he comes back, will end up, I think Hoyer will end up being Cody Hoyer. That is, will end up being perfectly fine and actually really, really good, especially if he can figure out the fastball stuff. So, I'm really excited. Like I said, one of the things I'm really, really looking forward to, and I very much hope with all the other moves they're going to make and all this stuff happening, that the Cubs don't go after. Madrigal sucks.
Tom, don't make me ban you, dude. This is your warning. Last warning. I just deleted 2 of your comments. Anyways,
maybe he was being facetious. I don't know. I hope so, but
yeah, I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, so it's just it's exciting that baseball's back. It's one thing that I know people had asked about kind of what was in the CBA agreement. To be honest with you, I don't really care all that much. All I care about is what the impact is. I mean, I do care. As people who run a blog, we care, but in terms of like having the conversation here, I don't think it matters. But I am very happy that they're not doing the 7
freedom of speech. Hold on. I'm going to stop you right there. Freedom of speech does not apply to Facebook or anything of freedom of speech is your ability not to be persecuted by the government, right? It has nothing at all to do with the
doesn't
right
mean you
to
can
say,
just be a jerk.
it doesn't mean you can say dumb stuff and we won't delete it or call you out on it. Like, that's not how freedom of speech works. That's got to stop.
Exactly.
Like that is worse than
we're
people
responding
should
to
of.
a
When people say
here.
would of and should of, that is, oh my God, it just chaps my ass, man. That's not how freedom of speech works. I'm sorry.
There's a reason we call this.
Yeah, there's my rant for the day. It has nothing to do with baseball. It's the misunderstanding of freedom of speech.
But
continue with your
to go back to baseball,
kind
though,
sir.
I'm happy that they're not doing the 7-inning doubleheaders. I absolutely hated that. I know some people were okay with it. I think you were all right with it, but I hated it.
Yeah, I liked
absolutely hated it. And I hated the runner on second. No, because it's just like when you get a doubleheader, all my life, I've been, I'm used to a 9-inning doubleheader and the way that it works. And so, like, I don't want less baseball in any situation, especially doubleheaders. I mean, so I'm personally, that's the happiest I am about anything is that they didn't screw that up. I'm glad they have the DH. I think it just makes sense. It's better for the players in the long run because now you've got more players that are going to be, on teams that's a position that otherwise wouldn't have needed to be filled. And so I think that's good. There's no runner on second base, right? In extra innings.
Right.
I think they got rid of that, right?
Gone. Yep.
Hated that. And so I think that, and obviously there's all the financial economic stuff that's pretty relevant to the players, with the CBT increasing and the penalties for going over, things like that. But I don't see that as really being applicable for most teams. It is applicable for the Cubs. They were over it a couple of years ago and had to get under, and the process of getting under can be painful, as we saw. But I think in the long run, the changes that happened, minimum salaries going up, I think, the pre-arb bonus pool for players, these young players who are now going to be eligible to make more money. I think those are all good things.
And I'm pretty sure, didn't we say on here that if they got to about 50 million on the bonus pool, I'm pretty sure we said, like, I think I said 675 on the minimum. So I don't know if I went as high as 700, but I thought we said like 50. And if they kind of met somewhere in the middle on where they were, which would have been about 230 on I feel like we nailed it kind of, and which also pisses me off. You're like, why didn't you bastards just go to that? Like, you could have done that weeks ago.
Honestly,
you knew you were going to go there.
They wanted this frenzy. I don't think when that international draft thing dropped and they were like, the whole thing's blown up because of the international draft, that just felt fixed to me. It just, there's no way that was the one thing that was stopping them from signing. And then suddenly they just got past it. It was like, that was just kind of like, I think the owners probably saw, they wanted to continue to play hardball on a number of different topics. And we don't know all the details. I mean, we know the details on the bigger things that were out there, but there's so much stuff that's coming out now. And of course, we'll have that stuff to the extent that it's relevant. But, I don't know how many non-hardcore baseball fans are really into all the details. So
you mean people don't want to know what the new surcharge is for going $90 million over the CBT, like the second the Cohen tax that they like? No, I mean, shit, dude, more power to you. If you go to 320 million, you get dinged for that. Good on you, which I think is like 100% at that point. I think it's like an extra, right? Because it's like 95% if you were over, more than $40 million over. But that's the recidivism penalty. So I think it gets to 95, like if you're in your third year of overage of more than 40 million. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of stuff, but I think by and large, you're not going to notice much of it. The one area where I think will be a very big change is if they get the draft figured out, which they have until July 25th to do, I believe, then the qualifying offer process system goes away. So now that will be very
I just don't know how much that matters. I have to believe that the players would rather have the qualifying offer than they would have an international draft. That's just my gut feeling.
Well, it's either or. Like the players don't want the QO. The players want the QO gone.
No, that's what I'm saying.
But to get rid of it, they have to have the draft. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Is that I think that the way it's going to end up is there will be a qualifying offer. They will not be an international draft. I just don't think that the qualifying offer is important enough. It only affects less than 20 players a year.
Yeah, I mean, unless they figure it's going to affect more and more of them, which, in a lot of cases is those very people who are not actually getting squeezed, because those are generally guys who are going to get pretty good contracts. I just still think it's funny that they're so stuck on the international draft. I mean, to me, the way that it was laid out, because I thought it was going to be some super hose job that was in there, but like, it's actually pretty solid the way they've got it set. Again, unless they are really fearful that a lot of that money is going to be pulled out from the infrastructure of those communities where it's most impactful. And to that, and there's good reason to believe that. It's like, the owners aren't just gonna be like, yes, we're putting like $20 million more into these bonuses for drafting 600 guys. Well, where's that 20 million coming from? You're not just doing that out of the generosity of your altruistic soul. You know what I mean? Like, you're probably gonna pull it from somewhere else. So
I guarantee it's the small market teams that want to draft. I mean, the big market teams don't care. They'll spend as much money as they want.
Right. Because now, and it's a hard slot.
Always been from the international draft.
Right.
So, I
Which,
mean,
although it's really it's a hard pool as it is. And that's the thing is right now, though, it does limit those things a little bit. But yeah, how many times do you see the Pirates and, so like how many times the Royals out there getting like the top international prospect, right? And so I think that's part of it there too. But yeah, I'm interested to see how that all pans out. But yeah, that felt like kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, hold on, and I think they had brought it up before, and the owners knew that it was a non-starter with the players. So it's kind of like one of those tactics that they wanted to use that and leverage that to get the players looking like the bad guys to an extent, as they go through this whole thing. I mean, it's evil players. And it's largely an ego thing, right? The owners want to be.
I have never once gone to Wrigley Field to watch Tom Ricketts.
I do all the time. But
never.
I have a Ricketts jersey in my closet, but I have his face tattooed on my ass. But no, I mean, I think a lot of it is that the owners wanted to make the players accept their offer versus the other way around. You know what I mean? That's what it's about. So it's not so much like it is a PR thing, but it's not so much like they're simply trying to win a PR war as they want to have their egos stroked as they go through this process, and that's the best way for them to do it.
Yeah, it felt like a high school fight, but now the fight is over, and we get to focus on spring training and drinking from a fire hose of baseball goodness over the next, I don't know, couple of weeks at least until we kind of get geared up. It'll be interesting to see. Like I said, we'll probably start podcasting a little bit more regularly. So I'd say probably twice next week. Definitely once, but probably twice. We'll just see.
Cool.
And work from there. But happy baseball is back day, everybody.
Yeah.
That's it. We're done.
Cool. See you, everybody.
Good talking to you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Later.